This week, we welcome Trevor Horwitz, CISO and founder at TrustNet, to discuss how to automate compliance and risk with Agentic AI. In the leadership and communication segment, is the CISO chair becoming a revolving door? Yes. When integrity collides with bureaucracy, the price of leadership in cybersecurity, and why walking away can be the bravest act. Improve communication with others by talking less, not more. And more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Every AI workflow in your enterprise touches sensitive data. Customer names, email addresses, financial records. One wrong move and you're facing a compliance nightmare. Enter Area, the enterprise AI orchestration and security platform built to protect what matters most. With Area, you don't have to compromise between speed and innovation or security and governance. Quickly deploy AI without cutting corners on compliance. Give your teams the confidence to adapt AI with Area. Stop gambling with your most sensitive information. Visit securityweekly.com/area to see it in action. That's securityweekly.com/AIRIA. Ransomware, supply chain attacks, 0 days. Cyber threats don't wait, and neither should your business. With ThreatLocker, you're not just reacting to threats, you're stopping them before they start. Our Zero Trust endpoint protection locks down your environment with pinpoint control over what's allowed to run and what's not. No guesswork, no blind spots. Just proactive, built-for-now security that keeps your business moving. Want to see how a true default deny strategy works? Head over to securityweekly.com/threatlocker and take the first step towards shutting the door on threats before they even knock. Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 417, recorded October 13th, 2025. Happy Columbus Day, actually. I'm your host, Matt Alderman. Joining me remotely is my co-host for this segment today, Mr. Ben Carr. It's been a couple weeks, Ben.
It has. I've been busy, but yeah, great to be back with you today and looking forward to having a good discussion with Trevor.
Yeah, and we still got this heat wave in Texas. Like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I'm still in the 90s up here.
Yeah, it's been a little warm down here, so we'll see. I think it's supposed to cool off next couple weeks.
Yeah, maybe. We're in October, folks. It's not cool yet. All right, one quick announcement. We'll get into this. Don't miss InfoSec World 2025, October 27th to 29th at Disney's Coronado Springs Resort. Cybersecurity pros, workshops before and after, and endless networking. Save 25% with code ISW25-SW by visiting securityweekly.com/ISW 2025. Trevor Horwitz is widely recognized as a cybersecurity leader with over 2 decades of experience as a co-founder and CISO of 2 leading cybersecurity companies, TrustNet and iTrust. Trevor has pioneered innovative information security and data protection solutions. He also previously served as president of InfraGard Atlanta in partnership with the FBI. Trevor, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Thank you for having me.
So we're going to talk about Agentic AI and compliance and risk, which are some of my favorite topics, by the way. But before we jump in, I think it would help for people to understand, what is Agentic AI? It's a term that's get thrown around a lot, but I'm not sure everybody understands what it actually means.
Yeah, I think it's a good place to start, since it's the focus of the engagement. Agentic AI really refers to systems that have the ability to not just generate content, but have the ability to actually take decisions based on certain factors. So analyze information and then execute specific tasks that are required by the AI decision-making process. And it's not just a prompt and a response, but really autonomy that creates the differentiation between agentic and generative AI.
Yeah, because generative really is about content creation is the best way for me to say it, right? It could be embedding or additional information, but really at the end of the day, generative is really good at getting a prompt and spitting out an output. Agentic may need parts of generative, but it also has to have a whole lot of other features and capabilities to actually do its job. And I think we'll talk about this a little bit because I think you guys do something similar to what we do when it comes to evidence collection. Like we've actually taught a bot how to find the settings panel, take a bunch of screenshots, and then analyze that data to answer a set of compliance questionnaires, right? Like that is a pretty sophisticated piece of code. And it's not just generative based.
Yeah, and that's the exciting direction that Agentic AI represents for the industry, because it takes a lot of the drudgery out of compliance.
Yes.
Not just for the organization themselves, but also from the audit process as well. So you're getting really a force multiplier by using those technologies, removing a lot of the drudgery and introducing new skills and new capabilities to the team.
So when I step back and think about the 20 plus years, 21, 22 years of GRC, right? Because I started in the really early days, 2003, I was running third-party vendor risk management program for one of the large top 10 banks. Software was all focused on Sarbanes-Oxley back then. It was Paisley and Open Pages and a few others. Archer was around, focused on IT. The space didn't have a name, right? Evolve a couple years later, now we have this thing called governance, risk management, and compliance. And so we've been 20 years where we think automation is workflow. Now we can actually really do automation in this space. And I think that's the really exciting thing of what AI, agentic, and these capabilities can actually do for us.
Yeah, we have all these new capabilities because of the introduction of AI technologies that didn't exist before. And it's taking things to a completely different level. The things that I'm excited about are not just the ability to interrogate source systems to identify deficiencies in controls and automate a lot of the drudgery that goes around collection of audit evidence, but then taking it even a step behind and looking at, okay, what are the things we can do in the compliance activities, typically in our case, what our clients are doing to automate a lot of the functionality that goes into compliance activities. So a good example of that would be using Agentic AI to interrogate systems, understand different controls, making modifications to their controls, and then writing the control procedures that are necessary for those controls to be executed. And that is a really exciting thing because it's essentially automating a lot of functionality and reducing the time from when a control activity has been identified, modified, to actually implementing that control within an environment.
Yeah, you know, I've always felt that automating the control deficiency or changing the control was kind of the nirvana state. However, we haven't really built trust in some of these systems yet. I'm wondering how ready we are to adopt the automation side of this.
Yeah, it's a good point. But the way I think of it is we're at literally the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this field, and it's evolving so quickly. We're still dealing with a lot of hallucination in LLMs, and that introduces a significant amount of risk. You certainly don't want LLMs making decision-making processes without a human in the loop. And I think that's really where we're seeing a lot of systems changing themselves to be not quite fully automated, but keeping humans in the loop for decision-making processes, validating that when a changes are about to be made, that this actually makes sense. And that's where we're seeing a lot of our clients really put the brakes on full automation to introduce that human in the loop variable, which will ensure that they have a more trustworthy environment through that process.
So, Trevor, I'm seeing the same thing. I'm seeing own personal experience and then talking to colleagues that, you know, people are very interested in the expanse of, agentic implementations. They've come to understand LLM and how they're thinking about using it in corporations, although the business is still moving fast. But I think one of my concerns is, from a security side, we talk a lot about burnout in teams, and we talk about replacing people that are doing menial tasks or repetitive stuff with AI or agentic, and that makes a lot of sense. But on the other hand, if we have people who are backstopping that and just kind of validating that it makes sense, isn't that even more disheartening for the security analysts that they're actually not even making the decisions? They're just verifying that what's happening is actually worthwhile, or can be trusted. Like, how do you feel about that interplay where it's kind of that weird interaction with, are we making people into the servants of the AI at that point?
There's a certain amount of inevitability to this. You just can't fight. So regardless of whether we personally feel like this is an affront to our decision-making processes, all of these evolutions that are taking place. I mean, you can go back to the horse and buggy. You'll say, well, I don't want to get rid of this. I don't want to give it this autonomy over to a motorized vehicle that basically doesn't require a horse. And the driving skill that you required for that takes on a whole different meaning. So I think I empathize with it, but I don't think there's really anything we can do about the need for us and where the technology is going to take us.
And I'm curious, though. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, do you think that depends upon the context of what we're doing, right? Like, I'll compare it to kind of the automotive space, and some of the things I'm seeing. It's not necessarily agentic, but it's a little bit of like the pushback, right? We went to really, if you look at cars today, I have a Rivian, a lot of screens, right? A lot of, you've got to, if I want to change where the vent goes on the AC, I actually have to touch a screen and drag the vent, which isn't very optimal, right? It doesn't really work in a human capacity. And then so you have startups coming out like Scout, where there is a return to the buttons, right? There's a return to physical interaction with stuff that's more human friendly. So do you think it's early days of this, and like we need to figure out how to coexist in this new reality?
Yeah, for sure. We're very early on in this. We hardly understand the technologies. I mean, there's articles coming out all the time, and in analysts trying to figure out how LLMs actually make the decision-making process, and they stumped. They can't actually nail it down, which is a frightening place to be. So yeah, I think it's still early days. We still have to evolve these technologies. The return to more retroactive type of technologies and user interfaces makes perfect sense. Interesting enough, you see that same return even in a younger generation, like millennials. You see them like returning back to different user interfaces that, they were popular in the 80s. So it kind of comes back, I think, when we're advanced technologies too quickly, don't really understand how users are behaving with them. And sometimes those things need to be ratcheted back to make them more usable, more friendly, more engaging, and reduce that ick factor that exists when the technology starts to go rampant.
Yeah. I want to talk through use cases for a minute, because there are some very obvious use cases, but then there's other ones that I'd love your feedback on, because I think there's a lot of things that both generative and agentic can do for us, right? So if I think about agentic, right, I gave you one example, evidence collection, as a really interesting use case. Program a bot, it logs in, it figures out how to grab settings, right? And it can automate a bunch of control validation for you on an application, for example. That's pretty cool. What are some of the other use cases, though, that we can use this technology for in our kind of security compliance risk programs?
Well, one of the things that I'm really excited about is seeing how agentic AI is actually being used to get to the nirvana you actually mentioned earlier, which is self-healing networks. So agentic AI being able to go and interrogate its own environment, identify vulnerabilities, and then apply a patch. And then using maybe a risk matrix to determine whether or not that patch can be automated, or do you need human in the loop? And those are very exciting activities. I think what's also going to be interesting is how do you audit an environment that is under that regimen where you have bots essentially going and do the remediation. And yes, you have humans in the loop for maybe some higher risk changes that are taking place in the environment. So that introduces a whole nother new level of complexity from an audit standpoint. Spending more time and looking at the systems themselves that are doing the control versus purely just looking at what is the outcomes from the changes that are being made.
Yeah, what about, so that's a lot of like from the assessment forward through remediation. I'm interested in on the front end too. So let me throw a couple of these curveballs at you. So I'm an organization that's in 30 different countries. How do I know what my overall regulatory landscape looks like and what should I comply with and not comply with? How could I use Agentic AI to actually help build my unified compliance program, my framework, the overall structure that I'd use that takes my company as I am, all my locations, the industry I'm in, and like assemble me like the perfect framework. Like, can you imagine that? Because we've been doing it by hand forever, Trevor, right? Like, I could see a use case that these things could sit at the front end and actually make recommendations on what you should actually assess yourself against. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, then that's really exciting. When you're looking at that level of complexity, there's huge challenges. Talking about literally hundreds of people involved in that process, monitoring the underlying frameworks, industry regulations, laws that are coming out, and then being able to apply them and adapt them across the organization. So a lot of complexity, lots of moving parts. And that's a great use case. So in my mind, it's going to be using like Agentic AI to be able to source that information, analyze the information, and then rewrite policies and procedures to adapt to that.
That's where I was going next, right? Because that's the next step, right? If I know all the things I'm bound to, I should be able to automate the policy procedure creation, right?
It seems like a no-brainer to be able to do that. But as we said earlier, keeping the human in the loop is still going to be a very, very critical part of it. What concerns me also about where we are in the evolution of the current agentic AI and generative AI tools is the hallucination and also the lack of auditability of how did it actually come to those decisions.
Yeah.
When we start to see more auditability about how the decision-making process was actually developed, and whether or not there were hallucinations in that path, that's going to be able us to get to another level where we actually have some real control over the process. I have a lot of skepticism. I think everything that we generate from generative AI today really needs a deep dive look to see whether or not that information is accurate. I wouldn't be trusting a lot of these systems to complete autonomous basis at our current level today.
Yeah, I've done some really interesting tests. I've actually had LLMs generate requirements for other AI-driven projects. And it's actually pretty darn accurate. Like it's not perfect, but to your point, you got to review it, especially if you're going to use it for automated downstream stuff. But the data and the structure that it sends you back is actually pretty accurate. And again, you have no idea how it's doing it. You just read it and you're like, well, that was pretty good. Like, and then you tweak it and off you go. That's why I think automating policies and procedures is it could be a really simple thing to do. Yes, you need a review process. You need somebody to finalize it. You still need people to attest to it, but the creation could be done literally in seconds.
Yeah, that is a fantastic use case. But we've seen some spectacular fails. We've seen some lawsuits where essentially the AI invented cases to support a particular orientation for the lawyers, caused a lot of problems for those lawyers. There's a big case now going on, I think in Australia with Deloitte, massive government report that was produced. I mean, it's all public information that had a tremendous amount of errors, basically hallucinations by the AI. And one of the things I got out of that analysis that was done on that particular case is why these hallucinations actually occur. And I think the orientation of the LLM is to essentially be a people pleaser. So if you orient your your prompts and you orient your direction to say, this is the outcome that I'm looking for, or generate this, it'll essentially say, I'm going to try to please you. And essentially that's one of the sources of hallucinations. It's a people-pleasing model.
Yeah, it seems that there's almost an inherent bias in some of these systems to essentially generate data to support the use case that you're asking it for, right?
Exactly.
Which then is just problematic at the core.
Yeah, you're going to have to look at that and say, like, can we adjust that bias either through the prompts that are generated, obviously keeping human in the loop when you're looking at results, validating those results. And it could even be the case where you have AI interrogating other AI. So you're using two different models to basically say, well, does this make sense? And that could be another stopgap in our path towards perfection.
It could be. It's funny. We've tested different models to see which one performs best. There are a lot of differences between these models and their outputs, even if you give them the same prompts, right? So to have AI kind of audit AI, it'll be interesting if it can actually be done, because I do see a lot of variation in the base models for the same basic prompts, right? So that's an interesting challenge itself.
There's been some interesting stuff, Matt. And Trevor, I'm not sure I'm sure you've seen this, but I'm interested in your take on it. AI is talking to AIs, right? The conversation that starts to happen is not a human conversation. And the context of how that works, like just trying to understand it, like you can't actually understand how they're having a conversation because it's on a different, it's just fundamentally, it's not how you and I would talk to each other, right? And so as you get into those advanced models, just auditing that and understanding it becomes very, very difficult because you don't even understand what the communication stream is happening between the two models.
Yeah, exactly. And one word to summarize that, Skynet.
Yeah.
You went where I always go with this. Like, so the question is like, so and Matt, I've been waiting to kind of bring this up. I've read a book recently, right? And two guys deep into AI, and they started out looking at actually how to generate, I think they called it artificial superintelligence, right? ASI. And they realized, partway down the journey, this was a really bad idea. And so there's a book out now called, and I'm going to butcher the title here, but it's generally called, If Anyone Builds It, We All Die. Amazing book, right? Like it goes through some use cases. It's not written too technical, but it's also not written like too story-like. But it talks about that exact thing. Like we've seen this story on several movies, Terminator being the biggest one, and it ends badly for everyone, right? Like, are you a contrarian to that, or do you fall into that alignment? Like this could go wrong horribly quickly.
No, I think these technologies are scary. Like a lot of technologies, we've had many iterations. I mean, you just think back, look back at autonomous vehicles. We have a case where autonomous vehicle has killed someone in an accident. So this is not like even theoretical things. Bad things can happen when we automate. We don't understand the technologies. We don't put in the safeguards. And this is definitely stuff we need to be careful of.
Yeah, it's something I talk to my engineering team about as we test the stuff we're doing. Like, how do we know that it's not doing something malicious? So we actually send it bad prompts to make sure that it doesn't do something malicious. But I think we're going to see more and more of these types of systems or audit systems testing different ways, because again, back to your point, Ben, it communicates completely differently than how we as humans communicate. So it's a prompt. You send it a prompt, it's going to try to do whatever it doesn't. It may not rationalize like, oh, that's a bad thing. You asked me to do it. It's people pleasing, so I'm going to go do it, right? And so now you got to think about your QA testing for these systems to now give it a bunch of negative tests to see if it actually does the negative test to make sure that it won't do something malicious in practice. Back to this whole, can we trust these systems to actually make the changes down the road?
Yeah, and how do you test all the boundary conditions, right? So when I went to college, which was a long, long time ago now, I had a professor, famously, it was an operating system class, and he would literally at the end of it on the final, like bang on all the keys just to see like if there was anything he could generate that was unexpected output that would cause something to happen, right? And I think that's the thing. We look for all the expected output conditions and inputs, but there's been a lot of cases where AI, like, yes, even though it's been written to not allow that, people have found very interesting ways around through prompt engineering to get the output they're looking for.
Yeah, our professor called that the elbow test. Every time we wrote some
Yeah.
code, she would take her elbow and she'd run it across the keyboard and let's see what popped up. And that was one of her validation routines when she was looking at our code.
Lovely. So, Trevor, where do we start our journey down this path? I think there's some great innovative stuff happening. I think there are some really interesting use cases that both generative and agentic can solve for. But if you haven't started down this path, like, where would you recommend people start? Like, what are some of the easy things or some of the maybe not so harmful things that I can start to use now and get value out of as this market continues to evolve?
A good starting point for me is looking at policies and procedures. And a lot of clients that we engage with do not have the manpower or do not have enough resources, do not have enough time to go and do periodic reviews of their policies and procedures. So that is a real easy one, because you can take a generative AI and run your policies through there and say, look at all these use cases, the technologies we're using, and can you do some updates on these? And particularly looking at things where you've made changes in the environment from specific procedures and allow the AI to essentially create new content for you and make modifications. Still would go through the process again of validating all those things. Matt, you've had your own experience with that, tweaking things. I think that's obviously entirely necessary. You still have to have the human in the loop. But that's a real easy one to go and get some quick value from. The other thing I like is, there are a lot of organizations that could use these AI tools to essentially do some self-audits. So get into a mindset of doing more of like a continuous audit process. So don't think about compliance validation as being a one-off activity during the year, but think of it as being more of a continuous activity that takes place all the time. And you can use AI tools to interrogate data outcomes from different controls and to do that validation. And that's going to help you identify deficiencies in your environment and perform remediation activities before they escalate. And those are two, I think, are the real easy ones for organizations to implement. It's not without challenges, accessing the data, ingesting all the data, because in many cases it's large volumes of data. It can be resource intensive, but the payoff out of both of those activities, I think, is very quick.
Yeah, I love that. I love the constant validation or the constant assessments, right? Like where you're looking at things where you may not have the resources, whether it be people or money, to like you can do a one-time a year thing. Now I think AI really does give people the opportunity to look at how do you apply consistent modeling to that, so you're not introducing gaps. Yeah, that's a really good one.
We might actually get to. Hold on one second, Ben. We might actually get to continuous control monitoring.
Could happen. We've been waiting a long time. Trevor, are there any areas where you'd say like this is a pitfall that people often fall into? Like I think security teams are looking to figure out and put a lot of feelers out there into different areas of AI or agentic. But like, what are the things that you'd say this is not a good application, or stay away from it because we've seen people fail trying to go down this path and it's not ready yet?
I think one of the most important things is to really cut through the hype. There's just so much hype about what AI can actually do, and just being able to cut through all of that and identify what are the core things that are actually capable. I think a lot of functionality now is just masking what some tasks that are already enabled in a lot of applications. Maybe they're enhancing them a little bit through the use of AI, but there's too much hype and too much promise. Some of the stats out there are we can, reduce the level of compliance activity from, to 10% of your current resource pool. I mean, those things I just don't really hold to be true right now. It's just impractical. It's not possible. So, cutting through that hype, I think, is really the first order of business. And the flip side of that is also challenging vendors out there to stop overhyping their products, to be realistic about what their products can do. No one's saying that their products are not capable, but making outlandish claims of the efficiencies that can be achieved in their technologies, I think is just a huge turnoff. I think the authentic vendors that come up and say, yes, this is a force multiplier and these are the actual results that you can achieve. It's not going to cut 90% of your cost. You can speed up things by X factor. I think that's where the money is going to be, and people are going to realize that these vendors are authentic.
Yeah, so I can give you real life examples, Trevor, right? We know through 3 different automation techniques, we'll get 60, maybe 70% automation. Maybe, right? That's roughly where we are right now. And I use 3 different techniques. That's the evidence collection piece. It's our continuous control automation and some stuff we've done through policy automation. We're not going to get to 90%. I just can't see it, right? There's so many non-technical controls and things out there that are just going to be super hard to automate, I think. And even if I can automate the 60, 70%, which is roughly where we are right now, somebody's still got to look at that data, right? To your point, somebody's got to validate that all that data still makes sense as they're driving decisions. Can they be more efficient? Absolutely. Are they going to eliminate 90%? No, I don't think we're there. I'm not sure we'll get there.
Yeah, I totally agree with that sentiment. Just too much hype over promise.
Yeah. And I do believe there are some really interesting use cases that these technologies can solve for. Things that we've done by hand for a long, long time. But again, you need somebody to look at the outputs and use that data and figure out how it impacts your downstreams. You're not just going to automate it all the way through the process.
Yeah, one of the things I think that also makes a lot of sense is when you're using any of these AI tools to think about the drive to making things more continuous versus episodic. And in that quest, I think there's a lot of value in it. But I think organizations need to realize this is a journey. It's not going to happen overnight. And those efficiencies will continue to evolve over time. And you'll end up getting smarter and smarter over time and automating more and more things. But understanding what the risk factors along that journey, I think that's critical.
Yeah, I think that's a great recommendation. Trevor, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
It's my pleasure.
AI gives attackers superpowers, and your employees are the soft target. Flip the script with Fable Security, the modern human risk platform. Fable's powerful risk engine connects the dots on human vulnerabilities, like password hygiene, phishing risk, and data sharing in generative AI, and deploys hyper-targeted snackable AI nudges and briefings, just in time, right where your people work. The result? Hard outcomes. 13x faster behavior change, 60 to 90% risk reduction. Make Fable part of your cybersecurity story. Visit security.weekly.com/Fable. Now that was a fun conversation. Now let's get into this week's articles. All right. So my first article, Ben, is the CISO chair becoming a revolving door? I say yes.
I say it's kind of always been a revolving door. When was it not?
I know.
I don't know what to say about this, right? Fighting the 3-year itch. I mean, I think it's more like 24 months. It's been shorter. It's been a little longer, but I think that's kind of what I see from a lot of people, but depends upon organization, depends upon statistics, but they point to burnout. I don't know. I mean, maybe burnout's a decent term, but why burnout, right? Like, I think we've discussed a lot of those reasons, but I think a lot of it's just because of how the role's treated by the rest of the management team, right? And by the board generally.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if it's burnout or not. It's interesting. I've been having conversations with one of my old programmers that kind of hit this burnout wall, and he came to me for advice, and he's like, but you've never experienced burnout. I'm like, no. I have. Like, there's times, right?
We push through.
Right, exactly. It's not like we don't face it. We do. Like, I think every role goes through a period of frustration, and you realize that you you're not making a difference. You're not going to move things ahead. I don't know if it's burnout or what you call it, but it's time for something new, right? Yeah. And sometimes you don't even know what that new thing is, Ben. Like sometimes you just walk away and just wait to see how things play out. Like you'll know this story because when I left Tenable, I did not work full time for, almost 7-8 months because I didn't know what I wanted to do next, right? I literally had no idea what I wanted to do. And I just started advising clients and I just kind of went through this, it'll work itself out. And it did. But sometimes that's just what you need to do. And I think CISOs face this every so often and there's other articles we're going to get in here today that I think are part of this reason why people think it's a revolving door is when you get to a certain point and you cannot move the organization forward anymore, it's too frustrating to stay.
That's the biggest thing, right? Yeah, that's it right there. It's like it's not a burnout of like, yeah, I can't do this anymore. It's a burnout of like, I've hit this wall of like, I'm not going to be able to move it forward, right? And I can think of things personally, career-wise, where you come in and you get kind of, I don't want to say open budget, but you get like, hey, we need to be more secure, right? We hired you to do this job, and you start doing it, and then it slowly pivots towards, well, let's not do that much, right? Let's not do this initiative. Like budget is going to be trimmed, and you start to think, okay, I have moved this line as far as I can, and it will be diminishing returns if I stay. I'd rather go somewhere where I can make more impact. And inevitably, the next guy, a lot of times, can move it a little further forward, and then he hits the same wall, right? Like I've talked to CISOs who've come after me like second or third guy, and they're like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I hit the same thing. And that's just hard. And so you feel like you have to move to kind of keep yourself moving forward. Yeah.
Article number 3 is a really good article. We're going to dig in pretty deep in a minute. But I put in this evolving CISO role from Technical Guardian because I thought, okay, so I'm a revolving door. I get frustrated. I leave. I go to my next role. How do I set myself up for success? So this article pulls out some things we've talked about on the show a lot, like learn the language of the business, understand the business. And so it walks you through that you can't just come in as a CISO anymore and just necessarily be a technical implementer of security technologies. It is much more than that in these roles now. And you got to know that kind of going into your next role, I think.
Do you think, so I totally agree with you, and we've talked about this a bunch of times, but I think one of the things that we come back to a little bit is the business aware of that, right? I mean, I think on one level they are. I think they're looking for people to be more relative to the business, but I think when you get in, again, to the last article, like you hit that wall of just pushing it back to like, well, this is really a technical issue. Like you can't participate in the forecast discussion for the business, right? And I think that's the mistake, is I think CISOs and CSOs should be embraced more. They should be brought into and kind of brought along on the journey with that, because I think ultimately security can be so much more effective if you actually understand where the business is headed and you're part of the business.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, but it's so funny because I see CISOs that have the business acumen. They understand the business. They can align controls and also understand the potential risks they're taking, right? And so I know those resources exist because I know them, right? Like they do exist out there, and maybe that's who's writing all these articles, but the business should be embracing that skill set, I think. Yeah. To be able to really be able to figure out what an effective budget is, how to mitigate potential downstream risks, not put too many controls in place that slows the business down. But if you don't ask them, you're just going to put them in this role over here in the corner. Just go implement MFA because some auditor told me I have to do it. That's probably not the right business relationship you want with your CISO.
No, and that goes, again, it goes right back to the revolving door. I mean, there's a theme that flows through these articles pretty well this week.
Yeah. This next article I loved. Like, I absolutely loved it. I wish Jason and Summer were on this week. But when integrity collides with bureaucracy, the price of leadership in cybersecurity and why walking away can be the bravest act. Back to the revolving door piece. He gets into some great, just really great observations about the challenge of the CISO in almost any business, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, the bureaucracy takes over in some respects, right? And when you know you can't go any further and you collide, yeah, it's time to walk away, right? And this is a long article, but he lays out the case in such a, I thought he did a really good job of laying out like the whole case for why CISOs leave.
Yeah, I thought the first 2 points were excellent. I really like, integrity colliding with bureaucracy. I've seen that happen with a lot of people I know, right? It's the right thing, but it's just difficult to get it through the bureaucracy of the organization. And it kind of stifles you. And it's like this oppressive feeling, a large weight on your shoulders as a CISO. And then that we talk about this often, the CISO's dilemma. Like, yeah, you do have everything that you have to worry about, but being empowered or having the mandate to go get stuff done, sometimes that falls short, and that can make it super difficult. So I really resonated with this article. I thought it was really good. The challenge I find is, look, I think there are almost two classes of CISOs, right? There are those CISOs who've been doing this for a long time and probably have developed the war chest to be able to walk away, right? Or the professional, impact to be able to walk away and know they're going to land something else. You have a lot of people that are on the front side of that curve. And it's really hard sometimes to walk away because, at the end of the day, you've got a family and, stuff that personally you're trying to take care of as well and support. And so that can put people in a really difficult position in this, as I imagine it can on the legal side too somewhere. But I've seen people struggle with this, and I've had conversations where they've asked, like, what do you think I should do here? And sometimes my guidance is, it sounds like you need to think about leaving because this isn't the right org. They're not handling things the right way. But yeah, it makes it really hard.
It does. And if you need, to support a family, then you got to find your new job before you leave your existing job. You can't just walk away.
And what do you say? Part of that integrity is not, you're not throwing them under the bus wholeheartedly either, right? You're trying to figure out how to split that baby. It can be challenging. And I think integrity is one thing. Most of the people I know who have this job, they have a lot of integrity, and they don't want to compromise.
Yes, I agree with you. And I think that's the hardest part of this job is because of the integrity that the role has, because they want to do the right things to protect data and systems, etc. And when it collides with the bureaucracy, it puts you in a very difficult position. He actually walks through different lessons learned from the exit, which, look, if you want to be in this role, or if you're in this role and trying to figure out whether you want to stay in this role, go down to section 5, lessons from the exit, what leadership really means when the badge comes off. He walks through, these are things you should be looking for. These are some of the outcomes he's learned. And I think they're so relevant for people to look at beforehand, to know what to look for. What are the signs to look at these things and go, oh my gosh, I'm in the wrong place. I better get ready to get out of here. Because I think these can help guide the exit path for certain people in the role, knowing that as soon as they start to see these things, it's time to go.
Yeah, look, and I think if you're looking for a CISO, look for someone who definitely has integrity, right? Like if you want a good CISO, that's what you want, is someone with integrity. There was a good line in the article that I liked, that you realize that for many, managing risk really means managing the perception of risk, right? And that's a hard reality to come up with, right? Is that you're really trying to coach people on the difference between reality and the perception and how to apply it appropriately. And, again, that comes down to the integrity of when you realize they're not willing to look at what's really going on, maybe time to leave. Yeah. And figure out how you're going to do that well, right? Don't just jump into it, but figure out how you're going to do that well and put a plan in place.
Yeah. It says integrity is the most advanced control you'll ever implement. It can't be automated, delegated, or faked. Integrity is the only security measure that protects both data and dignity. And unlike tools, it doesn't depreciate. It defines legacy. So again, back to your point, you definitely want somebody who has integrity, but it's also one of the hardest things, I think, for humans to be able to
and
do
it's a weird thing, right? If you have somebody that has integrity, they're not going to give up that integrity, right? It's kind of the core piece of it.
Yeah, exactly right. All right. Building cybersecurity resilience through awareness, leadership, and action. It's October. It's Cybersecurity Awareness Month. As I think Adrian said the other day, every day is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Anyways, at least it should be.
All of our jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways. Yeah. So that, they pull out these articles in October to make sure that, we are being proactive about all the human elements that we should concentrate on, at least for the month of October. Actually, folks, we should be doing this all the time. Unfortunately, I cannot program an agentic AI bot to interact with all your human. Well, maybe I could someday, but anyways.
Now you're implanting cyber into everybody's brain. Yeah,
right,
look, it's important, but like, what is education, right? Like, really think about that when you're approaching this. It is not giving people a PowerPoint slide presentation and taking a 10 survey test question thing afterward. That isn't education, right? You need to figure out how to connect with your user base, how to really hit the hygiene thing hard, and how to apply just, I guess, a good underlying understanding of where your user base is and what you need to kind of make the change. That culture thing is really, really important. And the biggest thing in education is, how do you slowly move the culture in a way where it's going to connect with your users?
Yeah, you said the word. I was waiting for it. Culture. It starts with culture, folks, right? Culture sets the tone, because if you don't have the right culture, it doesn't matter what security awareness training you do, when you do it, how often you do it, it's not going to stick. Starts with culture. Then you figure out how to constantly, continually focus on cyber hygiene and helping educate people on what the right and wrong things are to do. October just becomes another month in the year.
Yep. That is the way it should be.
That's the way it should be. Happens to be a fun month for me, but that's all right. It's birthday month. It's Halloween. It's all kinds of fun stuff. I love October. October's the best time of the year. All right. When authentic leadership backfires. Another great article, by the way. This is an HBR article, because we talk about authenticity, right? We talk about being authentic leaders. This article goes into some of the authentic, maybe behaviors that might not work out well for you.
Well, yes, and I like how they put it, kind of like some of the things they kind of explained. It starts out well, right? Well-intentioned, but you take it too far and it gets to a negative place, right? Which I think, too much of anything can be negative. Radical candor is a huge one for me. Like, I often wonder what people mean by radical candor, because I don't think anybody really likes the output of radical candor. Like, if it's really radical, if it's really like God's honest truth, here's what I feel. But the point is, you have to get to a place of being able to figure out how to spin that in a way where people are willing to accept the message you're trying to put forward, right? That was one of the ones that really connected for me. Yeah, out of this.
Yeah, there's a few of them here, right? I think about dress and appearance, right? I always want to make sure I dress appropriately when I go into a meeting. Like, I flew to London. I haven't been in a suit and I can't remember how long been. Like, literally. And I'm like, I checked with the before I went to the meeting. I'm like, are we in suits? And they're like, yeah, we're in suits, right? If I would have shown up in a tracksuit and everybody else in that meeting's in suits, I'm just saying, I actually don't wear tracksuits. Paul's maybe a better one for this, but you got to know when to dress the part when you walk into certain situations, right? So there are just some really interesting ones here about, yes, you want to be authentic, but you also have to understand the situation. You have to understand who you're talking to and dealing with, because it's not always perceived well when you do some of these things.
Look, in Horwitz, humor, right, and sarcasm. Like, I think, that's a difficult one, because sometimes, like, it can be perceived in the moment as everybody was laughing at it, but how that was taken out after the fact cannot go well for you. So I think, look, you really have to analyze all these and think, like, are there areas where I need to correct a little bit more because I'm over indexing on trying to be my authentic self.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be so authentic that I'm actually going over the top into a place that is actually very negative. Just saying. Yes, that was an interesting article. All right, last article. Improve communication with others by talking less, not more.
Yes, this is, I find this challenging because I sometimes it's easier to fill the space in a communication, but I think, if you actually learn this one where you can kind of pull back a little bit and let other people kind of have space, I think there's a lot of dividends to be paid for this.
Yeah, it gives you some tips on kind of how to talk less, but also to engage with who you're talking to.
Yeah, it's
right?
the engagement, right?
Yeah, it's the engagement. And it's really understanding how to engage and how to build effective communications where you don't have to fill all the void with conversation.
The assume positive intention. This is one I've been trying to really focus on a lot. I think we get into these conversations, especially depends upon your communication method, right? Like delivering something with email or a text, like it's easy to misperceive this. And so I told a lot of people on my team, like, pick up the phone, have a conversation, assume that what was said was meant with the best of intentions. And, if it's not, go from there. But like a lot of times it's not. The intention behind the communication wasn't initially, it's how you first perceive that. So there was some good stuff in here.
You mean like sentences in all caps?
Yeah. Never seen anybody do that.
Never seen anybody do that. Or they misinterpret something and they think it's negative when it's not. And if at first you don't succeed, just try again.
Yeah.
But use more of these tips, right? Like use eye contact. Say their first name, Ben. Ben. It's a great day today, Ben.
Seek other people's point of view. Right. I mean, like that's one I see a lot of new leaders fall into is they'll go into a meeting and kind of articulate a viewpoint and then just, not solicit other people. Like, is there some other context to this? Is there some other way we should be looking at it? Right. How did you see this? I mean, I think that solicitation of other people's thoughts is also really important to get buy-in.
Yeah, of course. I mean, otherwise, what are they in the meeting for? If you've already made a decision, right? Then what are you doing? Now, I mean, I guess you could be kind of a dictatorship and you're just there to proclamate what you're going to do. But in most environments, aren't you there to kind of solve problems together? Don't you want other viewpoints or not?
Yeah, which is the real point for me of diversity, right? It's look, you may come to a decision that you already came in the meeting with, right? Like that's perfectly, if that's the right decision, then that's fine. But get the understandings of different people who may have different contexts than you, who may have different visions than you. Try to understand and see, you actually have to do active listening at that point. Not just let them speak, but actually try to understand where they're coming from. And often the output of the product that comes out is much better than where you started with.
Yeah. I mean, it's not bad to have some assumptions going in, but also solicit feedback and see how that might change. Because there might be other ways to approach things. There might be better ways to solve things. But if you're not having that open communication and dialogue, you're never going to know.
Agreed.
Ben, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining me today. Hope Summer and Jason are back with us soon. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. We'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.